So you want to open a US bank account, but you're not a US resident. You don't want to waste time and money flying to the US for nothing, and you're skeptical about any of these scammy-sounding remote opening services. Well, I was recently in the same position, and luckily, I've been able to open more than 5 US bank accounts and 2 US credit cards while being a non-resident. So, no matter whether you're looking for offshore USD banking, sending USD internationally with low fees, business banking including remote opening, personal banking including remote opening, a debit card, and an investment account, or opening an account with any of the top 5 US banks, and how to easily get any US credit card. So if you want to jump ahead to your specific use case, then I'll put the timestamps up here somewhere. Otherwise, let's go. Here's a little known truth when it comes to banking in the US as a non-resident. You actually have a lot of good options available to you, and some banks offer really fantastic services even though they're not well known. So the hard part is knowing which bank is the right choice for you. I'm going to cover 3 different categories of banks in this video. So first of all, the US banks. The biggest US banks are Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, and Citibank. But there's also a large number of viable smaller banks that you can choose from. So some of these banks are better for certain use cases. Some are easier than others to open as a foreigner without a social security number. There is even one large US bank that I know of that offers remote opening for non-residents. I'll talk about that in a second. You've also got offshore US banks, and then lastly, non-bank EMIs, or electronic money institutions. You also need to know how to decide which bank account is going to be the best for you, because it's not just about which is the easiest to open. It also depends what you actually want the account for, and what features it offers, and of course, safety. How safe is your money going to be with this bank? So I'm going to evaluate 13 different banks using these 3 criteria: ease of opening, safety, and features, so you can pick which is the best US bank account for you. And of course, then I'll explain step by step how you can open accounts at any of them. And by the way, I created a Google Sheet summarizing all of the information that I'm about to share in the video. So if you want to use that and follow along with the video, the link is down below in the description. Otherwise, grab it after you finish watching. It's going to be pretty useful. So imagine if there was a banking system that promised to be completely connected to the US banking system without the need for an SSN, a social security number, or being a resident, or even going in person to the US. That sounds promising, right? Well, you can find all of these benefits in Puerto Rico-based banks. Now, these were the first options that I found while I was in search of trying to open a US bank account remotely. Now, I want to talk about these banks first, because while they may seem like a great option, they have one big problem. So let me explain. So the main 3 Puerto Rican-based banks that I found in my search were Zenith Bank, FV Bank, and Strategic Bank. And of these 3, I found Zenith Bank to be the most interesting. So to sign up, if you go to Zenith Bank's website, all you need is a passport as proof of ID and proof of address. Their eligibility requirements are pretty good. It says residents of over 50 countries can, but the disadvantage is it's not free. So Zenith charges a $20 a month fee, and they claim that this is because they're a full reserve bank. So basically that means they're not going to make money by lending out your deposits to others like most banks do, but instead they make their money just by charging a monthly fee. So the idea is you have the security of knowing that your assets are there in the bank and they're not going to blow up. At least that's what they claim. And here's the big problem that I have with opening a US bank account with any Puerto Rico-based bank. So mainland US banks are regulated and FDIC insured for the first $250,000. That means if anything happens to that bank, then your funds up to $250,000 are securely backed by the US government. You get the money back pretty much instantly, even if the bank goes bankrupt. But Puerto Rico banks are not regulated in the same way as mainland US banks are. So basically, by putting your money into these banks, you take a much bigger gamble, and banks do fail sometimes. The 2 main business banking choices are Mercury and RelayFi. I'm a customer of Mercury, but from everything that I've read, RelayFi offers a very similar service. So I'm going to speak mainly to Mercury, but treat them as being pretty equal. Both these services have a lot of advantages. First of all, it's online only. You don't need to go anywhere to sign up. The user interface on the platform is really slick. It's really modern. It works really well for whatever you need to do your business. You can get unlimited virtual debit cards, which is nice. Mercury has a credit card as well. RelayFi doesn't. So this is a huge benefit if you hold large balances. Both Mercury and RelayFi are protected by a really huge amount of FDIC insurance. The coverage amounts are $5 million for Mercury and $3 million for RelayFi. So I checked this. It seemed too good to be true, but I went and checked inside my Mercury account. And sure enough, it's an enabled by default. So the way that insurance coverage works is by using what's called a sweep program. So basically, every $250,000 that you have, they divide it out into different US bank accounts so that no one bank account is holding like a larger amount above the coverage. And maybe you don't have that much money right now, but if you're planning to in the future at some point, then it's really nice to have an account that's that secure. Speaking about the Mercury credit card as well, so it's super easy to get. I just got it yesterday actually, and the requirement is to hold a $25,000 in your balance at all times. So as soon as I put that money in the account, within about an hour, I received an email saying I was eligible to get the credit card. So I logged into my Mercury account, and literally a few clicks, and they issued me a virtual credit card, and it has 1.5% cash back, and you can use it straight away. I think they can send you a physical card too, which I don't need. Just keep in mind, you need to maintain that $25,000 balance to keep that credit card active. So the Mercury account sounds really great. There are a couple of big disadvantages. First of all, you need a US LLC, obviously, but you also need, and both RelayFi and Mercury say this, you need some kind of planned or existing operating business in the US. Now, I personally haven't had any problems with that for my LLC, but your experience may differ. I have heard that they are getting more and more strict about that requirement. So it's possible that you could open an account, be able to use it, and then at some point they would actually be asking you to have a presence or something that you don't have in the US. The other disadvantage is that not every country is supported. Mercury does support more than RelayFi, and so I'm actually eligible for a Mercury account, but not a RelayFi account. So both Mercury and RelayFi seem like good options if you are eligible. I can personally highly recommend Mercury. Of course, the big problem with RelayFi and Mercury is they only support businesses, so you can't have a personal account. And I wish they did have personal accounts because the services they provide are best in class. But still, that's not a problem, because if you are looking for a US bank account for your personal need, then I think I found the best option for non-residents. And weirdly, no one's talking about it. I opened my account with this bank not too long ago, and I'm kind of kicking myself. I didn't find it sooner because it would have made a lot of things much easier for me. So the bank is Charles Schwab, and specifically, the account you want to open is the international brokerage account. So keep in mind that it's called a brokerage account, but you also get a fully functioning bank account and a debit card. And the list of reasons why I like this bank account so much is pretty long. First, it's one of the large banks. It's not a small or offshore bank. It's the 11th largest bank by assets. There's no US address requirement. So unlike the other banks I'm going to cover later, Schwab doesn't ask you for a US address. And actually, this account is only available to individuals who don't live in the US. Remote opening, so you can open your account completely online. You don't need to travel to the US at all. Insurance. So unlike most of the previous options we talked about up until now, your funds are insured for up to $250,000 as well. And the account comes with one of the best debit cards in the world for international travel. And as it's a brokerage account, you can invest in US securities. So the platform has some pretty interesting investing features. Like for example, it's the only way that I've seen for non-US residents to invest in US Treasury auctions. So the sign-up process, it's easy. It took me like 20 minutes. The only thing to be aware of is when you are going in to sign up, it asks you for a tax ID number. That's the tax ID number of your home country. It's not asking you for a social security number. What else? So there is supposedly a $25,000 minimum initial deposit, but this wasn't enforced, and I asked customer service about it. The guy who I spoke to didn't know anything about that limit, even though I had seen it mentioned on the website. Note on the insurance. So the SPIC is equivalent to FDIC insurance. Because the account is a brokerage account, it doesn't actually change anything there. So basically, you get $500,000, 250 thousandths in cash. So it's the same as FDIC. About the debit card, the reason why the debit card is so good is that it has no foreign exchange fees. So you're getting charged the bank rate. It has no ATM fees. So actually, if you go and use it at an overseas ATM, then Schwab will refund you the fees that those banks charge you, which is really nice. To get the debit card, first of all, you open your account, then you go into your account online and you fill out a form, and it takes about a week to process. And then they send that debit card by courier to your international address, which is really nice. One last advantage compared to the other US banks that I'm going to talk about. Schwab has better customer service, and this can be really important because some US banks expect you to go into a branch in person to deal with problems, but Schwab is online only, so you won't have that. Disadvantages, there are some. Not all countries are eligible. You'll have to check at the sign-up page. It just has a list. You select the country, and it'll tell you whether you're eligible, and there is no credit credit card or any business accounts. Overall, if you're a non-US resident, you're looking for a versatile and legitimate US bank account without the need to go in person to open the account. This is my preferred option. By the way, it took me a lot of searching to find all this out, and people are literally charging thousands of dollars for the information, half as good as what I'm giving to you guys in this video. So my only question right now is, if you are finding this valuable, now would be a great time to hit that like button. Leave me a comment as well, because I love to know that you're enjoying it. So if you're going to need a credit card or you aren't eligible for a Schwab account, then you still have plenty of other options. It is possible today to open a bank account at pretty much any of the top banks in the US. And I know this because I've personally opened accounts with 3 of the top 10 US banks, in addition to the Schwab account. But there are a few tricks that you need to know if you want the process to go smoothly. Now I'm just going to talk about the process for the top 10 banks, and specifically Chase Bank of America, Citi, Wells Fargo, and PNC. You can try with smaller banks or credit unions. I just know that all the banks that I just mentioned, the largest ones, have branches everywhere in the US, and I can pretty much guarantee if you follow this process, you'll be able to open an account with at least one of them. So here's the process to open an account at one of these banks as a non-resident without a social security number. Number 1, choose the bank. One thing to keep in mind, none of the big US banks have really great customer service. I've heard Wells Fargo is very problematic because apparently a lot of things that you need to do will actually result in your account getting locked. And when it gets locked, you have to go there in person to solve the issue. So obviously it's not practical if you live overseas. I think if you have to choose one of these banks, Chase is probably going to give you the best service, but your personal experience may differ. Step 2, show up in person. So if you want an account at one of these large banks, you have to go in person. So don't bother paying for someone who says they can give you a contact or whatever. Just go to a bank in person. Step 3, bring the required documentation. So you're going to need 2 IDs and usually, but not always, a proof of address. So this is where you're going to need to get a bit creative if you don't have a US address that you can use. I'll give you some tips. So first of all, it's completely legal for non-residents to open a bank account in the US. It's not a matter of law. It's just that the individual banks have their own preferences based on their target customer base and, like their risk profile and who they want to target, basically. And ultimately, it's actually up to the individual banker to approve your account or not. So this means you need to go and talk to the banker, sit down with them, ask them what documents are acceptable to them, and they'll tell you exactly what they need to see. So for example, PNC, they don't require address verification. You can see this on the website. They accept a US tourist visa instead. Another tip is once you have one account open, then you can use the statement from this first account to pass verification at the other accounts. Because once you get the account, you can change your address at any time. For example, you can change it to a foreign address, or you could use something like your LLC mailing address. Again, it depends on the individual banker and what they're going to accept. Next tip is to play the numbers game. So let's say you get rejected, which probably won't happen, but if it does, go to the next branch over and just try again. Try 3 branches of the bank that you want, and then if that doesn't work, then go to a different bank. Now, I've always been able to get my account opened the first time, so I've never been rejected, but it's completely fine. It doesn't change anything, or there's no black mark against your name if you need to try a few times. Another hack, if you find that the reason the bankers are rejecting you is because you don't have a social security number, go to an area that has a lot of migrants. I've read a lot of stories about people coming from Latin America and just going to Miami and just walking around the city, and a lot of those banks are used to opening accounts either for people like us who are non-residents or for people who are living in the US, but they don't have. So that's migrant workers with no social security number, no visa, nothing like that. And if they're getting back accounts, then you can too. Just a brief mention for a smaller bank I just found before I was filming this video, Ocean Bank. So I haven't personally used these guys, but I see that they have accounts designed for international customers as well. So like I said, I just found out about them. I haven't had a chance to check if they do online openings, but you can just go into the website, call the customer service line, and ask. Either way, whether it's online or not, that would a % be another option if you don't have that US address requirement. So now you've opened a bunch of US accounts. What about credit cards? Now, unfortunately, very few of the banks we've talked about will give credit cards to non-residents without a social security number unless you do this one thing. So this is how to get almost any US credit card as a non-resident. The main thing that you need is an ITIN, or Individual Taxpayer Identification Number. This is basically an alternative to the social security number. It's issued by the IRS to people who need to file taxes in the US, but they don't have the ability or they don't have a social security number. So do consider whether getting an ITN meets your actual needs. For example, having the ITN, it won't create the obligation to file taxes, but you should probably check with a tax advisor whether or not it makes sense for you to get one. If it does, then the good news is that having that ITIN is going to make it much, much easier to get a credit card at at any of the major banks we've just talked about. Remember, you can open the account without the ITIN, but to get a credit card then is the next step, which needs the ITIN. Now, filing for the ITIN with the IRS can be a bit of a painful process. I put it off for a long time. You basically have to scan documents and mail and stuff like that. But I found a company that makes it pretty easy and painless to file for the ITIN. This is why I did it. Actually, because it was all remote. I didn't have to do anything. They handled it all for me. So the company is the ITIN. I'll leave a link in the description below. And actually, I'll leave a discount code as well. So if you do get the ITIN with them, it'll give you like $50 off. So those guys make it really easy to get the ITIN, but you still have to wait like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 months to get the ITIN number back from the IRS. But once you have that number, then you'll be able to apply for almost any credit card, again, with the bank that you're already using. So the process to get that credit card once you have the ITIN, it's going to be almost the same as if you actually had a social security number. It's worth trying to apply online. So just go to the bank, go to the website, or in your account if you have the account already. But if that doesn't work, then you just need to go back to a branch in person again. But you will have that key requirement, which is the ITIN number. Now, the first time you do this, you won't have a US credit history. So you might need to apply for a secured card first. And that's basically where you have to lock up the balance that's equal to the credit limit. Then after 6 to 12 months, or however long it takes to build up that US credit score, try again with your ITIN, and you'll be able to upgrade to a better card, or just get that same card unsecured. And that's it. So by now, you know all of the best ways that I found to open a US bank account as a non-US resident with no social security number. Hope you found this video valuable, and enjoy banking with your new bank account in the land of the free.